Imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up and pack your bags, say goodbye to your friends and family, and you leave to another country, say to study. How would you feel about that? Kevin, Jason, how would you feel about that? Pretty cool, right? And but in the long run, it's not. But so everything seems fun and enjoyable. You arrive at the airport, you get a taxi cab, you go to the dorm room, you meet with your new roommates, and you're learning, discovering things, and suddenly you realize that something is wrong, and you start feeling down, and all the confidence that you had before starts collapsing like a house of cards. So why is it happening? The term I'm about to introduce to you today can apply literally to anyone sitting here. Simply because some of you were born in California but came here from a small town. And some of you, like me, came here from a different nation. And some of you probably never left Los Angeles. Chances are that some of you probably did or will experience living in a new foreign country. And while doing that, you sometimes might feel anxiety, you might feel down, or you might feel depression, or in a more scientific term, you experience culture shock. And this is what I'm going to discuss with you today. The reason being is simply because, unlike most of you here, I did not grow up in America. And I'm such a newbie here. I came here less than a year ago. And I had to go through this weird emotional crisis that I couldn't understand, but I had to, because I had to deal with that. And but the main goal of my presentation today is to tell you that culture shock can occur literally to anyone who exposes himself to a new foreign environment and is completely normal. So first of all, I'm going to tell you what culture shock means, then I'm going to tell you what the stages of culture shock are, and then I'm going to give you some of the tips on how to manage this problem if you ever encounter it. So first and foremost, what is culture shock? An Oxford Dictionary defines culture shock as a disorientation happening while exposing yourself to a new culture or a different way of life. And Dr. Deborah Swallow, an international keynote speaker, she, in her writing, says that culture shock is characterized by periods of frustration, anxiety, or even anger. And she says that regardless of your maturity, previous experience, or even the knowledge about the country you're going to, you still to some extent will experience a level of culture shock. And also in this connection, a website that is called teenhealth.org also says that it's natural having difficulty adjusting to a new culture, simply because people in a new environment have different beliefs, different values, different identities, and because of these differences, the way they speak, live, and communicate could be completely different from what you have used to. But the good news are, this thing is completely temporary. So now that I talked to you about what culture shock means, I'm going to move on and tell you about the stages of culture shock. And most of the studies have agreed that there are only 5 stages of culture shock. And usually the first one is called the honeymoon stage. This is where you enter a new culture or a country. Everything is fun and enjoyable. You're excited because you're learning and discovering new things. And but then at stage number 2, which is called a distress stage or a disintegration stage, this is where actually the culture shock starts happening. The differences are no longer new, and the differences create the impact. Also, you realize that your loving friends and family are no longer that easily accessible. And which brings us to stage 3, which is the reintegration stage. This is where actually, this is probably the worst part of culture shock, because you feel truly hostile to the environment. You just like the food, the weather, the language, the people, you hate everything. And yeah, that happened to me. So, but at stage number 4, which is called the autonomy stage, this is you, so to speak, come out of the fog. And you start accepting the differences, and you learn the way to accept them. And at stage number 5, which is called the independent stage, you are yourself again. You accept the differences, you view the world, perceive the world in a new yet realistic light. And so basically you're back on track again. And so now that I told you about the stages of culture shock, let me give you some of the tips on how to manage this problem if you ever encounter it. And Probably the biggest tip that I can give you today is value your culture, maintain your own culture, because it's really important. And of course, keep contact with the friends and family. And Verge magazine in this article gives some of the good tips on how to overcome this problem. And so the first one probably would be just try to realize that culture shock or simple plain old anxiety or anger can occur at any time. This is life, everything happens, we feel depressed or angry. Also try actually learning about the country before you leave your home. And of course maintain the sense of humor, because sometimes if you do not laugh about the things that bother you today, later you might cry about them. And simply because you're the one who are entering a new culture doesn't necessarily mean that you're the one who has to do all the learning. Let your classmates or new friends learn about your culture, and maybe learn about the food from your home country, which is really important. And probably you left some of the good friends or family back home. If you miss some of the places from your home country, keep the pictures of your friends or relatives of the places around you to make you feel better. Skype, text, call, and email on a daily basis. Share your experiences. So basically, now that I told you about the some of the tips on how to manage this problem, let me wrap up and restate that culture shock can occur literally to anyone who exposes himself to a new way of life or a different culture. And we'll learn what culture shock means. We learn what the stages of culture shock are, and I gave you some of the tips on how to manage this problem. And remember, the biggest key on how to manage this problem is maintaining and valuing your own culture. And as George Bernard Shaw once said, I dislike feeling at home when I'm abroad. Thank you.